What a different Christianity we might have had if only the founder had reached his full stature. I shall end up by pointing out how this deepens the significance of the crucifixion. One feels for the first time what a disaster it was, what a tragic waste, so much promise cut short. Oh, must you be going? Well, so must I. Goodbye, my dear boy. It has been a great pleasure, most stimulating and provocative. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye. The ghost nodded its head and beamed on the spirit with a bright, clerical smile, or with the best approach to it which such unsubstantial lips could manage, and then turned away, humming softly to itself, "City of God, how broad and far." But I did not watch him long, for a new idea had just occurred to me. If the grass were hard as rock, I thought, would not the water be hard enough to walk on? I tried it with one foot, and my foot did not go in. Next moment I stepped boldly out on the surface. I fell on my face at once, and got some nasty bruises. I had forgotten that though it was, to me, solid, it was not the less in rapid motion. When I had picked myself up, I was about 30 yards further downstream from the point where I had left the bank. But this did not prevent me from walking upstream. It only meant that by walking very fast indeed, I made very little progress. Chapter 6. The cool, smooth skin of the bright water was delicious to my feet, and I walked on it for about an hour, making perhaps a couple of 100 yards. Then the going became different. The current grew swifter. Great flakes or islands of foam came swirling down towards me, bruising my shins like stones if I did not get out of their way. The surface became uneven, rounded itself into lovely hollows and elbows of water which distorted the appearance of the pebbles on the bottom and threw me off my balance so that I had to scramble to shore. But as the banks hereabouts consisted of great flat stones, I continued my journey without much hurt to my feet. An immense yet lovely noise vibrated through the forest. Hours later I rounded a bend and saw the explanation. Before me, green slopes made a wide amphitheatre, enclosing a frothy and pulsating lake into which, over many-coloured rocks, a waterfall was pouring. Here once again I realized that something had happened to my senses, so that they were now receiving impressions which would normally exceed their capacity. On Earth, such a waterfall could not have been perceived at all as a whole. It was too big. Its sound would have been a terror in the woods for 20 miles. Here, after the first shock, my sensibility took both, as a well-built ship takes a huge wave. I exulted. The noise, though gigantic, was like giants' laughter, like the revelry of a whole college of giants together laughing, dancing, singing, roaring at their high works. Near the place where the fall plunged into the lake, there grew a tree. Wet with the spray, half veiled in foam bows, flashing with the bright, innumerable birds that flew among its branches, it rose in many shapes of billowy foliage, huge as a fenland cloud. From every point apples of gold gleamed through the leaves. Suddenly my attention was diverted by a curious appearance in the foreground. A hawthorn bush, not 20 yards away, seemed to be behaving oddly. Then I saw that it was not the bush, but something standing close to the bush, and on this side of it. Finally I realized that it was one of the ghosts. It was crouching, as if to conceal itself from something beyond the bush, and it was looking back at me and making signals. It kept on signing to me to duck down. As I could not see what the danger was, I stood fast. Presently, the ghost, after peering around in every direction, ventured beyond the hawthorn bush. It could not get on very fast because of the torturing grasses beneath its feet, but it was obviously going as fast as it possibly could, straight for another tree. There it stopped again, standing straight upright against the trunk, as though it were taking cover. Because the shadow of the branches now covered it, I could see it better. It was my bowler-hatted companion, the one whom the big ghost had called Ike. After it had stood panting at the tree for about 10 minutes and carefully reconnoitred the ground ahead, it made a dash for another tree, such a dash as was possible to it. In this way, with infinite labour and caution, it had reached the great tree in about an hour. That is, it had come within 10 yards of it. Here it was checked. Round the tree grew a belt of lilies, to the ghost an insuperable obstacle. It might as well have tried to tread down an anti-tank trap as to walk on them. It lay down and tried to crawl between them, but they grew too close, and they would not bend. And all the time it was apparently haunted by the terror of discovery. At every whisper of the wind it stopped and cowered. Once, at the cry of a bird, it struggled back to its last place of cover, but then desire hounded it out again, and it crawled once more to the tree. I saw it clasp its hands and writhe in the agony of its frustration. The wind seemed to be rising. I saw the ghost wring its hands and put its thumb into its mouth, cruelly pinched, I doubt not, between two stems of the lilies when the breeze swayed them. Then came a real gust. The branches of the tree began to toss. A moment later, and 6 apples had fallen round the ghost and on it. He gave a sharp cry, but suddenly checked it. I thought the weight of the golden fruit where it had fallen on him would have disabled him, and certainly for a few minutes he was unable to rise. He lay whimpering, nursing his wounds, but soon he was at work again. I could see him feverishly trying to fill his pockets with the apples. Of course it was useless. One could see how his ambitions were gradually forced down. He gave up the idea of a pocketful. 2 would have to do. He gave up the idea of 2. He would take 1, the largest. He gave up that hope. He was not looking for the smallest one. He was trying to find if there was one small enough to carry. The amazing thing was that he succeeded. When I remembered what the leaf had felt like when I tried to lift it, I could hardly help admiring this unhappy creature when I saw him rise, staggering to his feet, actually holding the smallest of the apples in his hands. He was lame from his hurts, and the weight bent him double, yet even so, inch by inch, still availing himself of every scrap of cover, he set out on his Via Dolorosa to the bus, carrying his torture.
"Fool! Put it down,"
said a great voice suddenly. It was quite unlike any other voice I had heard so far. It was a thunderous, yet liquid voice. With an appalling certainty, I knew that the waterfall itself was speaking, and I saw now, though it did not cease to look like a waterfall, that it was also a bright angel who stood, like one crucified, against the rocks, and poured himself perpetually down towards the forest with loud joy.
"Fool," he said, "put it down. You cannot take it back. There is not room for it in hell. Stay here and learn to eat such apples. The very leaves and the blades of grass in the wood will delight to teach you."
Whether the ghost heard or not, I don't know. At any rate, after pausing for a few minutes, it braced itself anew for its agonies, and continued with even greater caution till I lost sight of it. Chapter 7. Although I watched the misfortunes of the ghost in the bowler with some complacency, I found, when we were left alone, that I could not bear the presence of the water giant. It did not appear to take any notice of me, but I became self-conscious, and I rather think there was some assumed nonchalance in my movements as I walked away over the flat rocks, downstream again. I was beginning to be tired. Looking at the silverfish which darted over the riverbed, I wished greatly that to me also that water were permeable. I should have liked a dip. "Thinking of going back?" said a voice close at hand. I turned, and saw a tall ghost standing with its back against a tree, chewing a ghostly cheroot. It was that of a lean, hard-bitten man, with grey hair and a gruff, but not uneducated voice, the kind of man I have always instinctively felt to be reliable. "I don't know," said I. "Are you?"
"Yes," it replied. "I guess I've seen about all there is to see."
"You don't think of staying?"
"That's all propaganda," it said. "Of course there never was any question of our staying. You can't eat the fruit, but you can't drink the water, and it takes you all your time to walk on the grass. A human being couldn't live here. All that idea of staying is only an advertisement stunt."
"Then why did you come?"
"Oh, I don't know. Just to have a look round. I'm the sort of chap who likes to see things for himself. Wherever I've been, I've always had a look at anything that was being cracked up. When I was out east, I went to see Peking.
What was Peking like?"
"Nothing to it. Just one darn wall inside another. Just a trap for tourists. I've been pretty well everywhere. Niagara Falls, the Pyramids, Salt Lake City, the Taj Mahal. What was it like? Not worth looking at. They're all advertisement stunts, all run by the same people. There's a combine, you know, a world combine that just takes an atlas and decides where they'll have a site. Doesn't matter what they choose. Anything will do as long as the publicity's properly managed.
And you've lived, down there, in the town, for some time?
In what they call hell? Yes, it's a flop, too. They lead you to expect red fire and devils and all sorts of interesting people sizzling on grids, Henry VIII and all that. But when you get there, it's just like any other town.
I prefer it up here, said I.
Well, I don't see what all the talk is about, said the hard-bitten ghost.